Okay, Brendan, I'm seeing we're streaming, so are we ready to go? Let me know.
Yep, we're ready.
Okay. Welcome to the March 1st, 2021 meeting of the CV6 Transportation Committee. My name is Gene Santoro. I'm the chair of the committee. This meeting is called to order at, let's call it 7:04 p.m. And tonight we're joined by Community Associate Brendan Berth. Members of the public, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. If there is time following the committee's discussions, we will field questions from the public. All questions are recorded, so anybody's questions who aren't answered during the meeting will be followed up if necessary. Andrew Gross has volunteered to take tonight's minutes. Thank you, Andrew. And now comes the extended portion of the housekeeping announcement. You should all have received emails from the board office with a link to a doodle sign-up poll for 2021 minutes takers. It is also being posted as we speak in chat right now. There you go. Thank you, Brendan. At the direction of the board chair, each committee meeting must have a designated minutes taker and a backup. So please make sure you sign up for as many slots as you can. If more than 2 people sign up for 1 month, the office will redistribute that fairly and let you know what the results are and when you'll have to take minutes. So please sign up as soon as you can. And I'll remind you, the link is in chat, so that if at any point you get bored and you want to sign up to do minutes, just go right ahead. Okay. We will now take attendance by roll call, and Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Joan Berenbaum. Joan Berenbaum?
She's not coming. She's excused, yeah.
Okay. B. Disman. Okay.
I'm here. Thank you.
Yeah,
He's here. I couldn't unmute myself. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I saw you, so I know you're here. Charles Hernandez.
Present.
Andrew Gross.
Present.
Yusuf Khalid.
Present.
Sandy McKee.
Present.
Phil Napolitano.
Present.
Matt Roberts.
Present.
Gene Santoro.
I'm still here.
Larry Shire.
Present.
Ann Seligman.
Here.
Brian Van Nieuwenhoven.
Present.
Ronnie White.
Present.
And James Wilson. Okay, I did see James here, so he
was here. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have quorum.
Excellent. Okay. Now it's time to adopt the agenda. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and appears on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. I don't see anybody's hands up. Brendan, do you?
Nope, no hands are up.
Okay, well then, if seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. Okay, the minutes from our last meeting were also distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there's no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing any objections. Brendan, do you?
Nope.
Okay, well, seeing no objections, the minutes from our last meeting are adopted and will soon be available on the CB6 website. I wanted to thank Larry Shire, who did last month's minutes, for doing an outstanding job. Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome.
Okay, the ground rules. You can recite along with me if you please. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. 1, no one may speak until granted the floor. 2, committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. You don't have to click the participants icon anymore. If you look down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the separate raise hand icon that you can use to do that. So we'll skip that part of the talk. The chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated aloud on the record at the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. We are required by executive order to create a verbatim transcript of this meeting, so please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Okay. And now we have the adopted agenda. So Brendan, if you'd put that up.
Sure.
Okay, whoops. There you go. So the first topic is discussion on ADA accessible pedestrian signals. The committee was sent a list of the signals where they already exist in CB6 and also a suggested list of some add-ons and that was meant to start the discussion. It's not meant to end it. Those are places we can start if anybody has additions, subtractions, whatever. Speak. We could, okay. Brandon, can you put up the, I think everybody's had a chance to look at where this stuff is, right? So you already know, that stuff. So let's start with Anne's hand up. Anne, you've got the floor.
Thanks. I had thought about between the, across First Avenue, right? It's like I think it's 32nd Street where there's not actually a street, but there is a crosswalk. Like that goes, it's from the, like, but basically people use it, I think, a lot coming from the garage, going to NYU.
Right. Yeah, I know exactly where you're talking about. I think that was on the list of places that have them. Brendan, could you check that, please?
You said it again, please. It was
at the First and 32nd. It's actually not a corner. It's not a corner. It's the middle of the street on both sides, but it is actually a crosswalk. And I thought I saw it on the original list of places that have these signals.
No, I believe First and 31st is on that list.
Okay.
But not First and 32nd.
That's fine. Then we should add First and 32nd to the list because it is a hospital crossing and that's where people are going to be most likely to need it. And that's the reason behind the other spots on First Avenue as well. So it's consistent. Okay, thank you, Ann. Brian, you have the floor.
Yeah, just really quickly. I think First and 31st and First and 32nd are the exact same intersection. There's only one traffic control between 30th and 33rd in front of the hospital. So
yeah, that could totally be right.
Yeah. The other.
That could be. You could be right. Okay, let's get rid of First and 32nd. Thanks, Brian.
Would it be helpful to have a Google Street View of the area just to visualize the?
If you've got it, sure, put it up. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll do that right now. Let me.
Sure.
The current share.
Yeah, it's not aligned with any of the cross streets. The cross streets are not
You're
there
right.
because they're cut off by the hospital and the Kips Bay complex. So it's a non-intersection. It's just like first
Right.
in front of the hospital, essentially. It approximates somewhere around 31st or 32nd, but there's no street mappings there. So this could be, this could be very debatable.
Yeah, yeah. No, but you're right. There is only the one crossing there.
And I assume it's this crossing that you're referring to, Brian,
That's it.
correct?
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
Sorry, I
There is
sent us down
traffic
that
to-
rabbit hole.
It only took 3 minutes. It's not a big deal. Okay, so anybody else have any additions, subtractions, comments? Okay, do we want to do a reso asking DOT to study these places and Ronnie I'm sorry, Ronnie, your hand's up. Please, you got the floor.
Sorry about that. I was fumbling trying to speak. I was just thinking about that very same cross section. Would a consideration be a crossing point that is maybe a block or two away, like where an ambulance may turn to go toward Bellevue or to any other medical facility from, like, say, Third or any other street more west? Thank you.
Sure. I'll answer that as best I can. It can be a consideration. I think we should come back to this, though, because from what Colleen has told me, and Colleen, correct me if I'm wrong, DOT is currently in the process of looking to get a new contractor to do this. They don't have anybody now. So as soon as they get someone, they will be doing this. So I don't want to load it up too much right now. I want to get it out there and get it done so we get to the head of the queue and get some things done. We can certainly come back later and finesse this, if that's okay. It just seems to make more sense procedurally to get something there now, and not go too far afield. I think we should do, Ronnie, since you're interested in this, you might want to start thinking about that in terms of the reach of things and draw up the next list of possible places that we can discuss for adding to the list.
It will do.
Okay, thanks. Phil, you have your hand up?
yeah, thanks, Gene. I just want to make sure that the committee members, those who are present and those who don't know exactly what an ADA accessible pedestrian signal is. There was an article published by the Times, and basically it's an audible alert that tells a blind person it's now safe to cross the street. If that could go in the meeting minutes, just in case someone doesn't know exactly what this device does.
That's a good point. The committee members probably know because the article was sent out to them, but you're right to bring it up and it should be in the minutes, so thank you. Okay, anybody else? Okay, I don't see any hands up. Do I hear any motions? We could.
How about I make a motion if you call on me?
Yeah, I just rose my hand.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Brian.
Yeah.
Brian has his hand up. Yes, Brian.
I make a motion to adopt this.
Okay. Is there a second? That's B. You.
I can't play my hand. I'm better off my hand than this other stuff.
I'm
Yes,
sorry. I
second
just looked
it.
at B's screen and it was entirely her hand. So I was just.
It's my hand up.
Okay, so we have a second. All right. So I think that anybody want to suggest some language? It should be pretty simple. I mean, it's just that we want to support adding these intersections to the APS program as soon as possible. That's pretty much it. No, unless somebody else has something. Okay,
Gene, can I ask the question?
sure.
Isn't it really you want the Department of Transportation to study this? And then if it's feasible, do it, or as opposed to just saying to do it?
I'm just following their language. They're going to study it first. We can just write the reso and ask them to adopt these things. That's fine. Your language is fine with me.
So it's coming in. We can study the locations, and if they're feasible, we'll let the community board know. We'll provide you with a written response as to which locations are feasible and which are not, and an explanation as to why it's not.
That's why I was using that language, but Anne, you have your hand up?
Yeah, it just to me that I was sort of ignoring Lexington and Grand Central because I was like, oh, that's not our district, but like one side of it is our district. And, the other side is CB5. And so I'm a little bit afraid that stuff might, kind of literally get lost between the cracks. So I don't know, Colleen, if you have insights as to whether, especially around Grand Central at Lexington.
I want to say in general,
42nd.
I want to say in general, a lot of the community boards support the audible pedestrian signal. So I don't think that should be something that would be very contentious. I mean, if you want to add it. I would think it's fine to add it.
Okay, just as a point of clarification, I have pulled up the list of accessible pedestrian signals that DOT has, and Lexington Avenue at East 42nd and East 43rd Streets are among the list of accessible pedestrian signals.
Is 42nd Street and Lexington on there?
Yep.
Right there. Yeah.
42nd,
That's
Lexington,
Lexington and 42nd, which is crossing Lexington. I'm talking about crossing 42nd Street.
No, that would be the whole intersection, unless, correct me if I'm wrong, Colleen, but that's the whole intersection, not just a part of it. It's the whole intersection.
I think it might be a part of the intersection. I don't think it's the whole entire intersection.
Yeah, a lot of times DOT, well, it's weird for these, but a lot of times DOT, they list them separately.
Yeah.
All right, then why don't we do this, Anne? Why don't you do what Ronnie's doing with the extended hospital zones? Why don't you take a look and take that list and come up with a list of intersections that you think needed around Grand Central, and we'll do that in the next tranche.
Brendan, if you wouldn't mind resending me, I've got the other list, but not the list of existing ones.
So not the list of existing ones, but the list of ones that have been proposed?
No, I have the list of ones that have been proposed, but not the existing ones.
Okay, yeah, I can absolutely send that.
Thanks.
Okay, any more comments, responses, questions?
Excuse me, Gene,
Yeah,
just to make sure we covered all the bases. We did discuss 1st and 30th and 1st and 28th, right? There's a
call up the
question
list
from-
again.
Just a moment. The list, the DOT list, or the list you created, Gene?
Well, first the DOT list and then the list that we created.
Okay, so let me. So this is the DOT
There's
list.
1st and 22nd, and there's 1st and 21st. And first, yeah.
Stephen O, is a member of the public, would like to discuss 1st and 28th and 1st and 30th.
Discuss what?
Mr. O,
Okay.
would you like to add something to your question?
Is there a question? That's what I'm asking. I mean,
People commute to the hospital, he says, I guess, from 1st Avenue. From 28th to 30th on 1st, there's entrances to NYU. So he's wondering if those crosswalks will have ADA accessible pedestrian signals. If not, perhaps we could investigate whether or not those are good intersections to suggest to DOT.
they're on this list of places that already have APS. So that's
Thank
the
you.
best answer I can give. Okay. Any other questions? All right, why don't we proceed to vote?
Okay. When I call your name, please say whether you are in favor, opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause. V. Disman.
Of support.
Charles Fernandez.
In favor.
Andrew Gross.
In favor.
Yusuf Khalid.
In favor.
Sandy McKee.
In favor.
Phil Napolitano.
In favor?
Matt Roberts.
In favor.
Gene Santoro.
In favor.
Larry Shire. Larry Shire.
You gotta unmute yourself, Larry.
I can read lips. That
Yeah,
was in
so can I,
favor.
but there he goes.
In favor.
There you go, thank you.
There we go. In favor. Okay. Ann Seligman.
In favor.
Brand Van Nieuwenhoven.
In favor.
Ronnie White.
In favor.
And James Wilson. James Wilson?
Yeah, I'm not seeing him on the screen, are you?
No, he's here, but
Okay.
muted.
Oh, there you are, James. Speak. Okay.
Are you in favor?
Yes.
Or opposed? In favor? Okay. So with 13 in favor, nobody opposed, nobody abstaining, and nobody abstaining for cause, the resolution passes.
Okay. Now all we need is a sterling volunteer to write this relatively straightforward and easy reso.
I'll do it.
I'll volunteer at once. Now, Ronnie, you've done 2 in the last couple of months. Let's see. There's B's hand again.
He is putting the hand up. She'll do it. Brendan helps me with my typing, but other than that, we're fine.
That's fine. Okay, thank you, B. Terrific. Okay. Moving along to agenda item number 2, the revival and expansion of summer streets. We didn't have this last year, as everybody remembers. There was an awful lot going on, COVID, BLM, all kinds of stuff. So we passed, but it's a wonderful event, and we really need it back. And as long as we're going to bring it back, thinking is, why not make it even bigger and better? So that's the basic thinking behind this. For background, I've spoken to, our city council members and their offices. I've spoken to the borough president's office, and everyone is receptive to this and interested to see where we're going to go with it. But it's also going to become something of a, at least borough-wide, that the information will be disseminated that community boards might want to look at this possible expansion within their district of summer streets, each of them as well as us. So that's the general picture. Specifics, I sent a list of things out that, again, talking points, places to start. I expect people to add, subtract, add their thoughts, or whatever. It's not a mandate. It's just some thoughts about how to connect this stuff up and make it work for the district. And the thinking was basically to give people access off Park Avenue to a couple of interesting sites in our district, as well as to the river, because the big lift here is going to be asking about closing the FDR. So that's something that has happened before. Community boards have asked for it. CB11 asked for it again just last year and the year before, if I remember right. And it does happen on a fairly regular basis. Brendan, it's picture time. We all know, if we've paid any attention at all, that it gets shut down several times during the course of the spring and summer and even the fall season for a variety of events that include runners, bike events, my personal favorite, motorcycle parades. So, at least in theory, there's no reason that we can't ask them to shut this down for a few hours a day so that people can use it. I mean, it's been shut for the 4th of July fireworks to let people climb up on the FDR Drive and watch the fireworks in the East River. So there's precedent, plenty of it. So there's that part of it. You know, the smaller asks are things in, like I say, in the district, and we can look at them and try to expand or contract or focus and see how they work. But that's basically all I want to say about it. I think I've said more than enough. I just wanted to set it up. So at this point, Anne, you got your hand up first again. You're fast on that button. Yeah.
Practicing for Jeopardy.
Oh, okay. There you go. Well, you've got the floor, so go ahead.
Okay, well, I was just going to say, I remember that last year, the reason it didn't happen was because the police were saying, you know, basically they didn't have enough resources to deal with that in the protest. I did not hear NYPD listed in the organizations that are like all good with it. Given that some precinct streets are still closed to just like regular traffic, I don't feel like they think it's over yet. So I'm just wondering if you've gotten their buy-in yet.
No, that's one reason that I was speaking with the borough president's office. That's what they're doing. I figured honestly that needed higher pay grade. So I passed it upstairs, and that's one of the things that they'll be doing. Yeah, but you're right. That was a pushback last summer. This summer, what we're hoping is that, and this was from the BP's office too. We're hoping that they will see this as an opportunity to recast their relationship with a lot of New Yorkers in a different and more positive light. So that'll be part of the discussion with them, which luckily enough, I don't think I have to go to. So there you have it. Andrew, you're next up. You got the floor.
Well, Gene, on that point, I would just mention that NYPD does have, what's it called? National Night Out, which I think happens in the early fall. So that's probably where they're going to tell you that they want everybody to come out and interact with them. I think, you know, before we get into the weeds of like specific areas, you know, that we should shut down, I'm a little concerned about two things. One is I'm not really in favor of shutting down the FDR. You know, I think that it is certainly pretty, even though those rare days when you shut it down, it is really, really an issue for a lot of people. So I would not be in favor of shutting down the FDR. I would be in favor though of thinking through, for example, the second issue of, you know, we have open streets, and we've got, you know, all the dining that's outdoors. And I'm just going to throw it out that I think we need to do a dance here, you know, and think about how much we're out on the streets already, and just take that into the consideration of how we do this. I'm not giving the answer here, but I think we need to think about that, and maybe shut things down that are going to have the least amount of impact on the flow of traffic. As fun as it is to gallivant down Park Avenue in the middle of the summer, I just think we should remember we've got a lot of stuff closed and blocked already.
Okay, Brian, you're next up. Your floor.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. First, I just wanted to, state that in regard to the existing summer streets, I think it was very bad that we did not have it in 2020. I think that there's a lot of interest to balance in the city, but when all things are considered, the general public that last year more than ever really needed an additional outlet to have activities that were distanced and safe and that were to replace all the things that we could not do during the year because of pandemic restrictions imposed by the city and state. And this is especially acute for our district because we have the least amount of park space in our district per capita of any of the community districts in the city. And the answers, we didn't actually really get answers from the city on this. We just heard, we're not having it. It was not up for debate. There was no chance to advocate for it. It isn't particularly an expensive event to put on. There were no protests around the time of the actual event. The protests that it happened in late May, early June. And I think that not only was it bad for us to not have it in 2020, but it had been going 10 years strong at that point, and it had been under-provisioned and over-attended. It was one of those things where it was like there were more people there at it than it really had capacity to have, and they hadn't even looked at expanding it through the entirety of the de Blasio administration, or the current mayoral administration. And that was really disappointing because there was a lot more that you could do with it, both inside of our district and outside of our district. And it just seemed like this kind of quick cookie cutter thing where it was the exact same programming and exact same siting for everything each year. And it was very commercial focused. And on top of that, the timing is absolutely terrible to try to get the most amount of people in the city involved. It's 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturdays, and it was witnessed that they were closing it down at like 12:30 the weekends they were having it, so they could get cars back on the road at 1 p.m. stat. We hadn't had any traffic problems with summer streets any of the time we had it, so there should have been no need for a rush to reopen the streets for it. And then on top of that, if it rained any of those weekends, it was just canceled. It was just like, they still had it, but people didn't come and there was no rescheduling. And we have all kinds of other things in the region, like in Westchester, they shut down the Bronx River Parkway nearly the entire length of it in Westchester to allow for 8 different Sundays of the year for people to walk, bike, and gallivant on it. So if they could shut down a whole parkway, we can do a little bit better than what we've been doing. So I think expanding it has been on the table for a while for a lot of good reasons. As far as bringing it back this year and expanding it, it's not going to hurt anything. We already have these events that close other streets. We clearly already have events that close the FDR. We talk about not impacting traffic, but who is the traffic on the weekends in this district? Our census data indicates that very few households have access to a car in Midtown East or in Gramercy. So the traffic is people who don't live here. They can go drive where they live. They can take a couple of weekends of the year to not drive here. That is just going to have to be what we do, because as a community board, we're supposed to represent the interests of all residents, not of residents of people who live 60 miles from here who want to come shopping in New York on an August weekend. We can certainly expand the hours a little bit. We can certainly expand the streets and facilities used. We can do a lot of things. And if we do a little bit too much and we find that we've run amok and out of balance, we can recalculate for the next year. But I think we should go bolder for this year.
Okay, so let me, Larry, then B, then Yusuf, then Andrew. So Larry, you're on.
Okay, I'd like to address Andrew's concerns about the FDR Drive. Perhaps some of you remember there was an event on the FDR Drive held in the summer of 1988 and then again in 1989 called Ekiden, which is a relay race, the distance of a marathon, which is inspired by a similar event in Japan. And it involved teams that came from every state and other countries, and the FDR Drive was shut off, and public was invited to come onto the roadway to cheer on the runners. It was sponsored by ASICS, and it was a big deal. Unfortunately, it didn't continue. Although there is a version of it that still continues from Sound to Bay or vice versa on Long Island to this day. And So it was handled, and it was handled, in my recollection, very well. And I think it could be done, or at least the closure of the roadway could be done. And there could be some very creative activities that, such as the Eki Den, that could be brought back during the summertime. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Larry. B, it's definitely, your hand is up and it's definitely your turn.
You got both hands. No, I actually think this summer is very significant to people in our community. I think this will be the time after the pandemic that people are looking for activities. You know, you hear the period of July and August, if there's enough vaccines, you know, people will want to start doing activities. I think given how New York City and especially our community responded during the pandemic, I think opening up the streets larger, I would do the FDR drive. I would do this in essence as a period after the pandemic where there's the freedom to do so many of these activities. And I would like to, as a community board, offer that ability to our residents that live in our district.
Okay, thank you. Yusuf, it's yours.
Yeah, just really quickly, I think one thing we should remember as a community board is that our community actually stands to disproportionately benefit from any street space that's opened up for pedestrians, because we have the lowest per capita park space or green space of any community district in the city. So, you know, to echo the points previously shared, this is actually an opportunity for us to reclaim space that I think folks are dying for right now, given limited park space and green space.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, you want another bite of the apple? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add that, I'll be polite, so I'm taking notes here. I just want to add that I'm fully in favor, to be clear, that we should go bigger and that we should have open space and that we should, you know, do this. But I just want to clarify that one of the other groups of people who has suffered a lot in COVID are the business owners and are people who are trying to make an honest living in our city. And I think we need to be especially cognizant, considering that we live in one of the wealthiest places in New York City. And to the point that we are only responsible for the place in which we live and the people who live here, we also have many people who work here and commute here to serve us, work in our restaurants, serve in our bars, manage our buildings. And these people come from places that are often very far away, places that, you know, we pay more money to live in CB6 as opposed to in Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, wherever they're coming from. And I think that when we shut down the FDR at a time when we are hurting the most economically that we have since the Great Depression, and we make it just one more day harder for those Uber drivers, NYC taxi drivers, or others to do their jobs, we should just remember that, yeah, we live here, but we're also making a huge inconvenience potentially to others who are trying to make just one more day's living. Again, I fully support this. I think we got to do this. Meaning we got to, you know, we should shut down streets and let people have freedom. I agree with everything that B just said. What many people said is essential, I think, for people's mental health. But I just want to think about that balance between going so big that we're economically or commercially hurting people just a little bit more than they've already been hit.
Okay, thank you. Phil, you're next. It's your floor.
Yeah, real quick, I just think we have to bear in mind that some of our grand plans are going to have to come at the expense of whatever COVID restrictions are imposed upon us. So the discussion is great, the flow of ideas is great, but if the city gives us some restrictions that we have to abide by, we may have to modify these plans in light of that. And everyone understands that, and it hasn't been put forth yet, but just bear that in mind that we're only a few months away, and fingers crossed that we have our choice of spots and the way we want to use them in a way that we can sort of disregard COVID. So bear in mind, we may hold this discussion again under different conditions if we're very lucky.
Thank you. Sandy, it's your floor.
I think it's all great. We really need to expand it. I just recommend that maybe we look at ways that we can join it up. I noticed in your notes that you said maybe we take 42nd from Park over to the FDR exit. So I think it'll get used a lot more if we can create circuits. I mean, right now people go up and down Park Avenue, but if we can link up with Park Avenue, like FDR to Park Avenue over to back again, those things would make it really helpful, I think, for those who are trying to use it. And I'd be willing to call the question.
Okay, well, I'll hold you on that because Matt's got his hand up.
Okay.
So Matt, please, it's your floor.
Sure, thanks, Gene. Yeah, I mean, I'm totally on board with everything that's being discussed as far as an expansion of summer streets. I think it's a terrific idea. The city needs it now more than ever. But I think we just have to understand what the cost is in terms of a police detail and other city agencies that need to be involved. Because as we know, the budgets have been slashed. And given the lack of economic activity, the city is taking in a lot less money. So somewhere we need to understand, what is the cost associated with this?
Okay, I'll actually respond to that a little bit. I don't want to hog the floor, but I agree with that. There's a couple of points, though. One is that it turns out that the overtime budgets for NYPD for this year were actually underspent after last summer so there's money left over. The second part of that, though, isn't even about this fiscal year. One reason I'm suggesting we look at July and August was that was something that a council member suggested to me because we'll be entering a new fiscal year. And so if we get this together now, those budgetary plans can be adopted for the new budget. Such as whatever the requirements are. So that's all I wanted to say about that, just to put it in a little context. That's what I know. Okay, I mean, so thank you for making those points, though, because they're important to make. They're a key piece of the environment. Brian, another bite at the apple for you. Sure, go for it.
Yeah, I don't want to get too deep into this because this is not transportation related, really, but I think it's a responsible point to say that we need to look at the cost impact of the plans that we might have in relation to police expenses and whatnot. I think that's why it's paramount that we need transparency on the police budget. And we don't have any information from the police. They just tell us yes or no and don't really explain why. I think that needs to change so that we as a community can make better decisions.
Okay, yeah, you're right. It's a little off point, but point taken. Any other observations, questions? Sandy, your hand's back up. Oh, sorry, who spoke?
Oh, that's me, Brendan.
Oh, Brendan,
do you want me to show the ideas for the summer streets that were come up with?
Well, let's see what Sandy has to say first. Sandy?
I wanted to call the question.
Oh.
Second.
Okay, well, then, unless somebody's really dying to see the list, I guess we can skip that part. So let's not see the list. We've got the question called. And so let me ask the committee, since I've put out these streets, we've talked a little bit, but what are we voting for? Are we voting on this list of streets and closing down the FDR? And in terms of time frame, question 2, what are we asking for? I mean, the 2 months of July and August were sort of what I focused on thanks to some input. Do we want to try to close them down for parts of both weekend days throughout July and August? Do we want one day? Do we want to leave it vague? How do we want to approach this? Okay, Sandy, then Phil. And then me, and then Andrew.
I recommend that we ask for one day, because I know it's a lot of volunteers that actually do the work for city streets. So that seems like a kind of a viable thing. You give one day out of your weekend to the city. And I would definitely extend it for July and August, both months. I mean, I think in terms of streets, if anyone has additional ideas, we could certainly add them to the resolution, but we could start with what we have now. And that would, we've got to start somewhere.
Right. Okay. That works. Let's see. Lots of hands up. I believe that B was next, and then Ann, then Phil.
All right, I'm going to be quick because I was going to echo what Sandy said. I do believe you have the 2 months, July and August. Okay. I would actually start with the 1 day. I think your list that you gave is a good starting place to write the resolution, including the FDR drive. If anyone wants to add while we're writing the resolution, I think you go for a lot more than may actually happen. And you do make a statement that we're cognizant of the need for resources, and that's why you're recommending July and August. I think that's important to highlight.
Thank you. Agreed. So now we've got Ann.
I agree about July and August because of the budget considerations. But I also kind of think June is like May and June. I know May is not really realistic, but June, people are just, there can be really nice weather and people are just dying to get out. I really like what Sandy said about having it be a circuit, and if there is a way that we can define that. And in kind of combining that with what Andrew said, I wonder if we make it sort of a slightly less obvious loop. And I don't quite know how we do this. I'm sort of thinking this out as I'm hearing all your input, but maybe we actually do something that would help the business people, where there are already a lot of streets that have restaurants but are not closed, and we make those kind of pedestrian streets, which like that we saw from the designer that Ronnie showed us. Those streets were all closed to traffic, and that was one of the things that made them so attractive. So maybe, we think about designing a circuit that actually incorporates kind of what are helping our businesses as well as making it attractive. I mean, especially in the summer, some people go away on the weekends, and the people that are here, kind of want to enjoy it, right? So that's a little bit orthogonal from some of the other stuff we're talking about, but that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, Phil, you're next up.
I'm going to hear what everyone has to say. I suspect that some people may echo my sentiments.
Okay. Andrew, Brian, then Ronnie.
Thanks. I appreciate what Ann said. First of all, I think that the circuit idea that Sandy proposed is a very good idea. I think that if done right, this can help small businesses. I also just want to remind that, again, I'm being honest. Like I think that all these ideas are good in my view, except shutting down the FDR. Again, there's no restaurants there. All it's going to do is prevent people from moving around the city. It will be nice for people to go outside. I think that's an overstep. And I also think it hurts people coming into New York and doing business and enjoying our bars, restaurants, and other businesses. If we're fixated on shutting down the FDR, like I just don't believe it's a good idea. I'm not going to support it, but everything else that was said, I think, is an amazing idea. And I think there should be accountability. If we are going to shut down the FDR, then we should add a statement in the reso that says that we're going to take into account the impact on business. That way we're responsible in case people are really upset.
Okay, just one point about that, which is that, as you heard, the FDR is shut down at least several times a year for a variety of things throughout the year. So I'm not sure why this should be such an exceptional thing, Andrew.
My view is that this year is not like other years, right? In other years, we're not in an economic crisis where people are fighting like day to day to keep their restaurants and businesses going. I don't know, maybe I'm overly sympathetic and I'm a softie, but when I get into like a Lyft or an Uber and I just hear about how people are like struggling to stay afloat, and I'm thinking again about like one more day where like they're just crushed in traffic and like can't do any business, or people we want to come in and do business in our city can't get in and out. I think about that because in this extreme situation, if it was 2019, Gene, or maybe 2022, I would say shut it down. Shut down the FDR. I just think this year is different.
Okay. Brian, Ronnie, then B.
Well, I agree with Sandy. And what I'm suggesting is going to be more kind of along the lines of wording. I think one of the things is that we have the vertical north-south streets kind of talked about. And I think what we were talking about in terms of a resolution didn't specify anything for cross streets, even though there really aren't any easy decisions. We do have streets in the district that have protected bike lanes on them going cross town. I think that.
Hold on a second. I want Brendan, could you put up the map or the slides of the crosstown streets? Because I think there's a little misconception here. There are actually in the proposed streets, there were several streets that go east-west and go to the river.
Oh, okay. Let me take another look at it.
So,
I was just talking about our discussion. We really haven't touched on that.
Right.
I know that I've seen copies of these proposals that were wondering about this, and I was wondering what had been settled. So let's take a look at that.
That's
my suggestion. My suggestion on that, regardless, was to do wording to say we recommend that the DOT consider crosstown streets to open up to connect east-west. But if we have specifics that we feel like we would confidently mention and approve the resolution on it, then I have no problem with that.
We have, Brendan, maybe you should shift to just the list again, since that's not actually the slide I wanted.
Oh, okay.
If you could do that, that might make it easier.
Just a moment.
Sure.
This is what you want, correct?
Okay. There's maybe shut 42nd Park. We've got using 35th or 36th Street to get to St. Vartan's, and then using the bike lane on First to get to 37th Street to get people to the park. The problem with Gramercy Park was connecting up to the river. Partly I left that out because frankly, I'm not sure what state ESCR is going to be in then. So if we're sending people to 20th Street, they may or may not be anywhere. But we could certainly write that in on the chance that they're done with that part of the project by then.
Well,
with 20th,
they should be able to get to the FDR regardless, if not, and probably not the Greenway, but.
Yeah, the other problem with it is going to be the precinct, which is between second and third, whether they'll want to let those streets be open. But those are things we can deal with after. I'm perfectly willing to go for them if people want to.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is that if we're talking about side streets that are not the major crosstowns,
right,
that there's a lot of concerns where it's hard to close the street down for the day to all traffic. And it's a little bit easier of a lift if we just kind of make it a suggested street with limited vehicular traffic and one-way traffic along the current alignments, so that bikes have first priority rather than having it just be a complete open street. I don't want to get too much into details of that. The other thing I wanted to say was, I agree that having just the one day a weekend is probably easier for the city to digest. I agree that July and August, the run of both months, are good ideas to put forward in this as a way of maximizing the benefit.
Okay, great, thank you. B, you're up again.
I just wanted to comment on Ann's thing. I would not open this in June. I actually think, as we spoke about COVID and where the city would be, I think you'll see more restrictions still in June. So I support the July and August, not starting in June.
Okay, thank you. Ronnie, you're on.
I agree with just an amalgam of what has been a consensus so far this evening, and so I'm just I think it's a great idea in general. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, Larry. Larry, you're up. You got it, but you got to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. I'm very enthusiastic about this. I really hope that this can come about. I would like to see a part of the FDR drive incorporated in this, and the concept of having a circuit that's brilliant. And so I'm in favor.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, ideas, complaints, grumbles, whatever? Phil.
Is James trying to raise his hand?
I'm not seeing him. I don't know. James?
Yes, he is physically raising his hand.
Okay, physically. Then in that case, James, you're on.
Thank you. In line with promoting support of existing restaurants, if we lined up a number of restaurants for particular things, Chinese, Indonesian, whatever kinds of food they had, Mexican, and we made a list of these places for maybe one afternoon, they would be, shall we say, featured, a Third Avenue group of restaurants featured for different cuisines. I don't know if this would work, but if they're not doing that much business, they might appreciate our giving them a little boost with some traffic and an announcement that these places are open. Just a thought.
It's a good thought, and it reminds me of something I should have probably mentioned earlier, which is that Brian, who's already spoken a couple of times, has volunteered to do community outreach about this to stir up interest and ideas among the community. So that could be one of the topics that he addresses with different people to try how do we deal with getting different businesses online for this and advertising their availability, let's say, to the people who are going up and down. It's one reason that I also had the clusters of things going off Park Avenue and into the district, was hoping that when they get as far as Third Avenue, they'll notice that there are places to eat and places to buy things. We'll see if that works out. I didn't want to stretch it too far and use too many crosstown streets at first, honestly, because that's when we're going to run into trouble with north and south buses on First and Second Avenue, for example, and things like that if we try to shut this down too hard. So it's kind of like echoing what Brian said earlier. We want to do it, but we have to be sort of, I think, judicious about how we approach it, because we don't want to, whether you agree or not about shutting down the FDR Drive, we don't want to completely shut down the transportation system in the city to do this in Manhattan. And the part about the UN that we've been looking at, the advantage to picking that as a complete circuit and using itself, besides the ramps at both ends that are sort of like a mini High Line for this part of the district, would be under those conditions. The fact is that is a particular part of our district that the police and everyone else have a long and varied experience of shutting down every year for the UN. So they know how to do that. We know they know how to do that. We know it's not problematic, and we know that they can deal with everything from buses to everything else that comes when they shut it down. So that was one reason, some of the thinking behind that, just to make it more explanatory. I know you can't all read my mind, and you don't want to be in there anyway, trust me. Anyway, any other questions, problems, observations? Well, gee, I'm looking for Sandy's hand now. Let's see, where is it? There it is. Okay. Oh, she's eating. Sorry.
I already called the question twice.
I know, but we couldn't move on it because we were still discussing, but now we can. Okay.
The question.
There we go.
Second.
There we go. We've got a second. Okay. So it's time to take a vote. Brendan.
Okay, I will conduct the vote. So when I call your name, please say whether you are in favor, oppose, abstain, or abstain for cause. One moment.
Can everyone just mute who's not being called on? Thank you.
James,
We're getting
I
feedback.
think that's actually might be you, because you're the only person that's unmuted besides me and Sandy. James?
I will.
There you go. That's
I've
it.
been
Thank you.
muted for now. Okay. B. Disman.
In favor.
Charles Fernandez.
In favor.
Andrew Gross.
Dean.
Yusuf Khalid.
Enthusiastically in favor.
Sandy McKee.
In favor.
Phil Napolitano.
Abstain.
Okay. Matt Roberts.
In favor.
Dean Santoro.
In favor.
Larry Shire.
In favor.
Ken Seligman.
In favor.
Brian Van Nieuwenhoven.
In favor.
Ronnie White,
In favor.
and James Wilson.
In favor.
Okay, with 11 in favor, nobody opposed, 2 abstentions, and nobody abstaining for cause, the resolution passed.
Excellent. Thank you all. I'm happily surprised because I didn't know how long it was going to take us to discuss this, but great job. Okay, now all we need is another volunteer on the altar of self-immolation to do the minutes for this. So,
I'll do it.
okay, Ronnie, I'd like to let somebody else get a chance to do it though, because you have done 2 in the last couple of months. So if anybody else would step up, that would be really swell. He's taking the first one. Gee, don't all run to the door at once. Okay.
I'll do it.
Who just moaned that?
This is Yusuf.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Yusuf.
Geez, now I feel bad. No, actually, I don't. Thank you, Yusuf. That'd be great. I think you can handle it. This is a little more complicated, but it's you've got the finesse to do it. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. Because I don't want to wear Ronnie out. We're gonna need Ronnie for other things in the future, and 2 months in a row is enough. So great. All right, thank you all again. That was terrific. Now I think we're gonna let Colleen from DOT do her report before we move into the discussing the budget requests, because that way it lets her go. She doesn't really need to be here for them, I don't think.
Hey y'all, it's Colleen from DOT. How are you? An update I have for you is that the intersection at 37th Street approaching First Avenue, we're going to include an offset crossing for improved visibility. And what this is, it will call for the removal of 1 parking space, which is at the east end of the hydrant. And we don't think it's going to be a problem with the removal of the 1 parking spot, being that we want to improve the visibility at that location. And we're looking to move forward to implement this new configuration in late spring, just so you know. So I shared the information with Jean, who can also forward it to all of you if you're interested in taking a look at it.
Just to clarify, Colleen, that's the northeast corner of First and 37th that you're looking at removing that corner parking space from. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, that's correct. And we're looking to do this at the end of spring. And for most of you who may not know what is an offset crosswalk, it is one with a center median that acts as both as a pedestrian safety island and means for directing pedestrians to look toward oncoming traffic before crossing the second half of the street. So that's a major safety improvement that we're going to be implementing there at that location. And then Jean, I know you inquired about the Ed Koch, the bike lane.
59th Street Bridge, as old timers call it. Yeah.
Yes. So we're confirming with our bridges when we're going to get the go ahead to come present this to the community boards. It's between CB6 and CB8. So as soon as I have more information, I'll share that with the board. But I'm thinking it'll be done early this year. We're going to come to the community board.
Okay, just to clarify, let me clarify for the committee, because what I'd asked Colleen about was you probably most, if not all of you, probably saw the mayor's big flourish announcement a month or a few weeks ago about changing the configurations on the Brooklyn Bridge and the 59th Street Bridge, having a lane for bike traffic on the Brooklyn Bridge so that the pedestrians can use the walkway, and opening up the south walkway on the 59th Street Bridge, sorry, Ed Koch, for pedestrians to get the jam-packed North Roadway unpacked some, because right now it's everything from bikes and e-scooters to pedestrians and joggers, and it's not very wide and it's a mess, and we get a lot of complaints about it for good reason. So after the mayor made his announcement, I went on the DOT website to check out the incept date. I let a couple of weeks go by, and it turned out that it had been on the calendar before to be done by next year, some point, probably the summer or fall. And that needle didn't move at all after the mayor's announcement. So that was the point of my question to Colleen. So it's good to hear that it'll be moving up to this year, because again, we're talking about a summer where, with all respect to Phil and Andrew, I mean, I agree that COVID is not going to be over. I think everybody understands that, and neither are restrictions or safety features. But people are going to still need to get outside, and they're going to get outside more than ever. And that bridge is one of the main transportation arteries for people to get back and forth from Queens to Manhattan. It's also just got great views. So you want to enjoy them. And so we should make it available to people as soon as possible was the thinking behind that. So Colleen, I'm really glad to hear that we'll be hearing from you about it, and in more updated and hopefully nearer to completion form. That's great. Thank you.
I know, I'm very excited about that as well. Because I know a lot of folks have been pushing for this, and I'm glad the mayor made the announcement about it.
I think Ann and Larry have questions about this. Is that right? Because they both have your hands up. Are they questions about this particular thing?
Yes.
Okay. Ann, you had your hand up first.
So Anne, before you ask me any questions, I don't know any particulars of the design or any elements yet. All that I know is that we are working with our Bridges division to find out a timeline when we're going to come to the community board.
Hey, well, I guess I just mostly have a question for you to bring back to them, because right now, if you're coming from the south, coming up First Avenue, as most people do because the flow is a lot better than Third Avenue, if it's before 9:30, people use the outer roadway, the south outer roadway, to get onto the 59th Street Bridge. Like, that's kind of the easiest way to go until 9:30. I'm pretty sure it's 9:30. The upper level is only inbound traffic. So it means that people coming up First Avenue to get on the bridge at all have to either kind of cross over to Third Avenue to go north and across 59th Street, or they have to go up to like 63rd Street south on Second Avenue and onto the lower roadway that way. And it just seems like there's opportunity to really increase congestion in the area as people are sort of compensating for the loss of that outer roadway access at 59th Street, from 59th Street and First. So I'm wondering how that is being factored in.
I think, Anne, when we come to present it, I mean, that's something that you can raise. I mean, if you want, you can send me an email.
I mean, you understand what I'm talking about, right? Like,
yes, you can send me an email. I'd be more than happy to share it with my Bridges division to see if they are thinking along the lines of what you just mentioned.
Great. That's what I'll do. I'll do that then, because it's just one of these like complexities of like that. It just needs to be taken account of, and I'm sure your wonderful designers will do it.
I'm hopeful they will. Yeah.
Thanks, Ann. Larry, you're up next.
Hi. I just wanted to remind everyone that if they hadn't seen the mayor's press conference today, he announced lifting the moratorium on capital projects. So if this is going to move ahead, it's going to have a lot of competition from other stalled work, and we do need to keep the pressure on to make sure that this gets implemented in a timely fashion. I'll join Ann, though, in maybe mourning the loss of a semi-secret escape route from Manhattan, which I've enjoyed for many years, coming up the FDR Drive and then scooting on to the Queensboro Bridge without very much traffic at all. But I think the benefits to most people, for most of the public, will outweigh the loss of that.
And I'll join you both in the morning, because it was, as a kid, going back and forth to Manhattan from Brooklyn or Queens was one of my favorite things at 2 a.m. to drive across the outer roadways of the 59th Street Bridge. But anyway, we won't talk about my ill-spent youth. Phil, you're up next.
Hi, thanks. Colleen, I'll be quick. Later in the meeting, we're going to discuss our CB6 budget request regarding transportation, obviously. And one of our budget requests was to have walkway counters. And as you probably know, that's a device that's going to count how many people and how many cyclists go through an intersection. And I was just wondering, if we're going to install these ADA APS devices, is there some design, perhaps down the line, where we could incorporate a walkway counter into the device that's that you're going to install on at those crosswalks? It's something, perhaps it's feasible, and maybe we could look into it.
I think if you're interested in doing that, Phil, it should be noted in your resolution. I have not heard of that being implemented at the moment, but maybe in future projects or requests where we get to install APS, that's something that could be considered.
Thank you. If we write a reso, we'll pitch it in that format.
We have a reso scheduled to be written, so we will be writing a reso. So
you can incorporate that into the reso.
Yeah. B, that would be for you. You okay with that? Thank you. Okay. Good deal. Any other questions for Colleen? Because I've got a couple, if no one else does. Okay, then I'll launch into mine. We were in our newsletter that was released today. We have a nice thing about how the sinkhole area has been filled up and is all operating, and the bike lane is back, except when I went up there to take pictures and Adam then went up there to take pictures. We realized that the bike lane is about a third unfinished, Colleen. The Jersey barriers that ran all the way to the heliport on the service road there are missing. There's a gap of about a third of the length of the thing. Now, Illinois State DOT told us today in the office that they had put everything back exactly the way it was and they were done. But clearly they didn't put everything back the way it was because we're missing these.
Jean, can you send me an email? Can you send me an email? And if you're in the area, can you take a photo, some photos?
Sure.
I don't want to send you out there, but if you're there tomorrow or so, take a photo and send it to me.
We have the photos already. I can send them to you, and I'll definitely send you the email tomorrow morning.
Perfect. I'll have my colleagues go out there and take a look at it.
Terrific. Thank you.
They restored it back, in kind.
Terrific. Another thing was, since we're talking about summer streets and talking about the FDR, this is a bigger question, which is what agency actually operates the FDR? I've talked to 6 different people in the last 6 days and gotten 6 different answers. So I'm really curious now, who's the person we're going to be operating? What's the agency that actually owns the FDR drive in terms of these things?
So it's half owned by city and state, just so you know.
Is that like half and half for the whole thing, or you guys own separate pieces of it?
We own separate pieces of it. You know what? I had a map. I'm going to ask our Bridges division. I had a map that laid out which areas or which sections are owned by city and state. Let me see if I can resurrect that and I'll send it to you.
That'd be terrific. Thank you. And the last question was looking again toward the spring and summer seasons. I remember fondly the days when DOT used to have street safety ambassadors out. Is there any chance of restarting that program and us participating in it? 2-part question there.
Sure. I mean, a lot of our programs, not a lot, but some of our programs were on hold, of course, because of COVID. And we are gradually getting back to, restoring street ambassador program. I think if you have locations that are critical that you want us to have the street ambassadors at, we can do that and we can work with the local precinct. So you can send me the locations and I will share that with my colleagues in our bike unit.
Okay, we'll have the committee discuss and generate the locations, and I'll figure out whether we do that in a meeting or maybe we can just do it separately. But thanks, I wanted that input. B, you have your hand up, you have the floor.
I have a question for Colleen that has to do with what just happened on 56th Street between First and Second Avenue. So if you look at the street, it looks like a war zone, the manhole.
Is this the Con Ed explosion?
Yeah, the explosion. So I'm talking about the street because I see they're still working on the manholes and stuff. After an event like this happens, Colleen, how quickly does DOT come in and deal with the street as it's, currently exists?
Well, because it's a Con Ed manhole explosion, usually OEM, the Office of Emergency Management, they respond with other city agencies, whether it's DOT or DEP. But I'm sure that we were on the site when this happened. We have our night inspectors who will go to the site to assess what the damages are. But again, I mean, it's a Con Ed infrastructure, so they will do the bulk of the work of the assessment of the damages.
Including repairing the street?
They would have to, yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Andrew, you have your hand up.
Yeah, no problem.
Yes, thanks. To Colleen, so I've been down by the construction site at the, I'm forgetting the name.
ESCR.
The pedestrian and bike path over by Stuytown. Gene, help me with the name of the official.
ESCR.
ESCR?
By Solar One. So anyway, like obviously it's a construction site, so I'm not expecting it to look beautiful, but I am a little concerned, like running through the actual detour area right now. I went there last week, and like the safety guys were like taking a break, and like a bus pulled up, and I gotta say I felt extremely unsafe going through that intersection under the FDR overpass. And I would appreciate a gentle reminder or whatever you guys can do, maybe just to go down there and take a look or supervise or tell them just to be a little bit more cognizant. I know that they probably want to, like the union guys working on there want to appreciate a nudge, but I truly felt that was extremely dangerous and like someone's going to get run over by a bus.
Andrew, let me ask you a question first. Were there TEAs or are you just talking about the construction crew?
You were the guys with like the flags who like stand there and tell you when to cross.
Flag guys from the construction crew. Yeah, no, there were actually TEAs, the enforcement agents who were there during the week. I wasn't there on you were there Saturday or Sunday, one of those days?
It was like, I think it was like towards the weekend. I remember it was like a Friday or Saturday. I don't know. I forget
Okay. They were there during the week because I was through there then. I can't answer for the weekend because I wasn't through there. That's why I'm asking.
They were there. They're there, but when at this one time I was there, the guy was like somewhere else and not in his position. And I just, the situation is dangerous. I think we agree as it is.
Oh yeah.
They just need to be ultra vigilant because I'm standing there trying to cross the street and like an entire, because of the way the traffic backed up the intersection, like the lights, the crossing cycled and no one could cross anyway. It was just a mess. So,
yeah, no, I agree with you completely. It's a total mess. That's not the issue. I'm just trying to figure out who you were missing because the TEA people were there during the week. I'm trying to find out if when you went down there on Saturday, they weren't there because then we'll ask to make sure that they're there on weekends, for example.
No, Gene, they were, I'm saying they were on the work site, but they weren't standing in the spots.
Okay.
They were like taking a smoke break or whatever they were doing. And it was super dangerous. And I happened to be was there. They shouldn't do that.
So that's, the ESCR is a DDC-led project, and Nadine Harris is the community liaison for that project. Right. I know from what Jeet is saying that there are TEAs and flag persons at the site helping pedestrians to cross. That's something maybe the board can just remind Nadine about it, and if you can just let her know the day and the time that you were out there and you noticed that it was really unsafe, she'll definitely speak with them.
Yeah, because you're not alone, Andrew. We are getting complaints about this and they're valid. That's why I'm asking the specific questions. Yeah, we will contact Nadine tomorrow and tell her that this situation is going south and it needs to be beefed up.
Yeah, I will actually, Gene, I will actually send you the exact time I was there.
Perfect.
Track my runs and I'll pull it
Great.
up.
Yep, that would be helpful.
Terrific. Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Colleen? Okay, Colleen, you can go home and whatever you're streaming this week.
All right, guys, you take care. Be well. Be
Thank
safe.
you.
Okay.
Okay, now we're going to do the ever fabulous budget requests section that I know everybody on every committee in CB6 looks forward to every year. Here we go. This section of the meeting, Phil is going to run this because Phil has been dealing with this. And Phil, you're on.
Thank you, Gene. Thanks a lot. So earlier in the week, the office sent you a spreadsheet with our budget requests for the upcoming fiscal year, which starts in July. And that's for the fiscal year 2022. And that spreadsheet is a simplified version of the air table, which holds our budget requests. We sent it to you in advance with the hopes that you could glance through it and ascertain whether or not you still agree with those rankings. Our objective tonight is to briefly go through these 9 items and see if we still prioritize them the same way, and or if we'd like to add something to it, to either one of them, any one of them. A few of them have been updated throughout the year, and we'll add those, we'll make those changes. But if you have some suggestions, now is a time to record them so that we can move them forward to be included in the 2023 Community District Needs Statement. So these 9 requests are open to the committee to provide some feedback.
I see that Sandy has her hand raised.
Could you please?
Sandy?
Yes, could you please show, do we have more than 7? Can we show the full
I counted
list?
9 of capital and expense for the Transportation Committee.
Okay.
That's what was on the air table. These are ones where we are primary sponsors, the primary committee on it.
And sorry, just I can't see them all on my screen. I don't know if other people can.
Yeah, only some of them can be shown at a time. I can.
Okay. So, I mean, it just would be helpful so we could kind of, look at the full.
I don't know if that helps.
Because I would move the 2nd Avenue subway down the list because we know for sure it's not happening right away. So maybe we can deal with things that are more immediate for our community. That's just a thought that I had. And
Sure.
the Queens Midtown Tunnel, now that we actually have the bike lanes, has become a little bit different in terms of how we utilize it. But and I would also say bus parking. I mean, I think maybe others in the community know more about this, but it had been a really horrendous problem. I'm not sure it's so much of a problem anymore. Those are just, some random.
Let me make a suggestion, Phil, that we start with looking at these budget requests that can be excised, things that we no longer want to support and that we want to remove. Again, as I think you outlined, this isn't going to have any particular effect on this budgetary round because of the arcane system the city employs, but it will let us start thinking about the next year's round. If we get these sort of dead wood things out of our way, we can start freeing our minds up to think about what else do we actually need and want to do, okay? So maybe we should go that way.
I agree. Just to kick that off, what is the status of the bus parking, the alternate layover locations? Have the buses been removed from CD6, or were they just moved to another street within CD6? Is it still an issue? I believe Sandy and Gene may have addressed it about a year ago.
I think that's probably a question for the MTA, but I don't know that, I mean, that it has been such a concern. We had a lot of complaints from within the community. I don't know if that's still the case.
Yes, the office does still get complaints about where buses park. So we do get constituent complaints about that.
And
just to
maybe
confirm.
that would be helpful. If you could quantify for us which of these are high priority items for our community. Brendan, you, as you
Yeah,
see.
I can definitely look to see whether we've had constituent complaints related to these various issues, and if so, how many.
So can I ask a question about the bus parking? Why is that a capital expense?
That's a good question.
The reason
Looking
it's
at
a capital expense is because back when it was added on, the idea was sort of a very aspirational solution, for example, like a new bus depot or something to get these buses off the street. Obviously, that's a very heavy lift, so that's why it was a capital expense.
Because my comment would be, it's really an accommodation of the streets. You're not going to see the capital. Talk about aspirational. I kind of think you don't do aspirational if you know that it's not going to really happen within the scheme of a budget.
Maybe it would be better categorized as an ongoing expense, which is the third category that we haven't used here yet.
Well, I'm not sure it's an expense. That's what I'm trying to see. If you're accommodating buses on the street, why is that an expense?
So B, are you saying it's a service request?
It's a service. In my mind, that's how I would view it.
B, are you suggesting
the theoretical question here, which is, can you have a budget item that costs zero?
You have the thing. That's correct. What is the purpose of putting a budget item that costs zero?
I think that the thinking was with this, that this would not cost zero. It would be sort of, they would build some sort of facility where these buses could go. But if this request no longer makes sense to the committee, the committee can choose to slate this for removal.
That's exactly right. Jesus is right about that. The aspirational thing was to build a garage someplace. But this is just hung around, like a lot of these requests, past its shelf life, let's say. And that's one reason for this part of the meeting tonight is to clear out things like this, if the committee decides, that really serve no purpose, so that we can mentally get ourselves adjusted to the fact that we should actually focus on things that we think really matter and can be achieved through the budgetary process. This may not be one of them. Other things like that, let me suggest, additional traffic officers in CD6. It's a nice aspirational thing. Unfortunately for us, all that's going to happen is that we'll ask for things that are in our district that has absolutely no meaning to the people at One Police Plaza who actually dish out where these folks go. They're not interested in the local precincts. They're interested in what their demands are citywide and how they shift people around. So this is actually another budget item that arguably, at least, is basically a dead end. Sandy pointed out the traffic studies for the Midtown Tunnel entrance area, which now that we've got that thing finally cleaned up, do we actually need a traffic study?
Also,
so things like that are the way. Install, remediate drainage for curb cuts at intersections. We have to evaluate these things on the basis of whether they can be achieved, whether they're realistic goals, and whether they're things that we think have high priority that we want to continue to stand behind, whether they've been on the budget requests for 3 years, 10 years, or 20 years.
Hey, Gene.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm sorry that if you have something immediate, okay, but there are 3 other people who have their hands up.
Sure,
I wanted you to take over this part of the meeting, but sorry, I've sort of butted in. Go ahead, Andrew.
Sorry, yeah, people were jumping in. I just had a question, but yeah, like you said, Gene, the Midtown Tunnel, like technically that's state property. So I mean, I know that you could do a study there, but just like you're saying, I mean, I don't know how much you can do with a study since half of it's the state's responsibility. Just a
Well,
question.
it's the entrance area, which is actually the city's, but the fact is that we were asking for that study to be done because we were pushing about closing up the Second Avenue bike lane gap and various other things. So that was the motivation behind it. And that motivation no longer exists because that's been fixed. So it's really a simpler question. It's not a question of jurisdiction. It's a question of what motivated that to be on the list to begin with isn't a problem anymore.
All right.
Okay. So let's go. I'm going to hand it back to Phil, but here are the list of questioners, Phil. We've got Larry, B, Ann, and Yusuf.
Larry, you're up.
Okay, I have a different take on the Second Avenue subway Phase 3 than we've heard so far. The Biden administration is just about to get its budget reconciliation for the big COVID relief plan, but next up is the infrastructure. That was something that never gotten any traction during the Trump administration, but I'm hoping during this phase of the Biden administration, they're going to reach for big things, and one of those big things is perhaps accelerating the work on the Second Avenue subway. And that could include the planning for Phase 3, for example. And so I wouldn't want to push this down. I'd rather push it further up for that reason.
Well, I wonder.
Okay, let me just cut in
whether
again.
or not, if it is.
Phil, excuse me. Sorry. Again, the point of this part of the meeting isn't to move things up and down the list. It's irrelevant. It doesn't really matter that much anyway, even in terms of the overall list. It especially doesn't matter now because what we're focusing on is what do we need? There are two things really that we're focusing on. One is what things can we delete from the list that we don't need anymore, that we don't want to support so that we can think about the things going forward that we do. And the other is tangentially to think about the notes that are in the notes all the way at the right side of the thing. Which are put there by the office. And if members have any other, we don't have to do this tonight, but people can look at it. And if members have any other input into the notes for those particular items, observations they've had, things they've heard, whatever, those should be put into the notes so that we have a fuller record of what it is that we actually think and know about each individual item. So that's something that can be done offline. We don't have to do that tonight, but tonight we should decide what things we want to lose from the list. That would be the goal, basically. Okay, I'll get out of the way again. Phil, it's yours.
Well, I personally feel that bus parking should stay in because if Brendan is still receiving complaints from the community board and it hasn't been resolved, then I think it's still an open issue. Whether or not it's solved by money, or whether or not it's a budget issue, I'm not sure. The best solution in these times may not be a bus depot when we could spend money elsewhere. But the issue hasn't been resolved. And if this is one way to bring light to it, I would keep it because it's a current complaint. If there aren't any other objections, or if there are, you could email me over the next few days, but that's my thoughts on it. Queens Midtown Tunnel, we did close the bike lane just a couple of months ago. If that was the major push for doing this study, then we've met it. There's no reason for it to be on the list. If there are some other very pressing traffic needs, and I'm sure there are around QMT, let's point them out in the notes so that we know in the future exactly why we're keeping it on there. What's the documentation, the basis for keeping it here? I happen to agree with Gene on alternate traffic enforcement officers, but it is a budget issue. If they did have more money, we would have more traffic enforcement officers. So it could be resolved from the budget, through the budgetary process. I think subway stations, that's just such a big ask, it probably won't happen, but it's already on the list of the transit authority's capital expenditures. It's just not gonna happen right away. It might be meaningless to keep it on there because transit authority already knows about it. You probably don't need to hear it from us another time. As for Second Avenue subway, I think the same logic goes to ADA, what I just said about 59th Street and Lex. If the funds come from the feds, great. Is it going to get done soon? Not likely. Is it all that important in our district's needs? It is important. It could be solved through the budgetary process.
Okay, Phil, you got a few hands up.
Super. Who are they, Gene? Please help me.
Ann and Brian, at least I'm seeing. So Ann was up first, Brian next.
So does that mean I'm called on?
Yes, you're on. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Phil, I agree with you about keeping bus parking because nothing costs nothing. And I think we do have kind of historic rezos asking for studies, which I'm not sure which category they fall into, but they certainly cost something to find. So I don't know, Sandy, if you want to raise your hand and see if that's something you want to talk more about as it was your time. But the bigger point I'd like to make is that I actually think it's really important for us to leave aspirational things on this list. And in fact, in some ways, I feel like the more aspirational they are, the higher they should be. We haven't had this discussion in the land use committee, but if anybody talks about taking the East Side Esplanade, the East River Esplanade off this list because we know we don't have the money for it, I will just hang my head in shame because I think these aspirational things, especially things like the East Side, the East River Esplanade, which I know is not this committee, if they don't hear from the community boards that this is a priority for them, it for sure won't happen. So that's just my little passionate speech about having things on there that are I'm not optimistic about. I also have a question, which maybe is a question, I'm not sure who it's a question for, but the issue of the walkway counters, which already came up this evening, and I think we kind of thought was a good idea. Their response was more information is needed from us, but then the notes say the Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee showed no change in the substance or ranking of this item. So I don't know how we ever get past this. Like, I don't know if somebody can just explain that there's a little circular or something happening there.
Yeah, I can try real quick. The budgetary process is in stages. It's complicated. It's one reason that moving things up and down the list doesn't matter right now. It doesn't really matter anyway. But, you know, what we're doing now is trying to weed the list and add to the information. So your point is well taken. I mean, more information is needed from the community board to make a funding decision. So where exactly would we want these walkway counters and what would we want them for? Initially, this was generated by us wanting to push about further developing the East River Esplanade. We wanted to push about the flyover bridge at the pinch point. And so the motivation behind this ask was really to document the large numbers of people who use that space to commute, for recreation, just to go for a walk the dog, and all that stuff. And that was the reason behind it. So that's why it's there. but it's not specified that way. We sort of made it a general ask. Do we want to make it more specific? Do we want to focus on a couple of places? Stuff like that. Those are things that we can think about if we keep the item on there. Okay, that's all I had to say. It's B and Brian are up next, Phil.
So you calling on me?
You
Okay.
go ahead.
So I want to answer Ann's question about aspirational. The Esplanade is not aspirational. It's something that the community board has spoken about, and actually, in my mind, should be on the list. Parking is a service issue. Bus parking. Is building a terminal really something that this community board wants? I guess when I look at budgets, and I do all the time, unfortunately, I look at what do you really want to be done in the next 3 to 5 years. And really, that's what should be on the requests that we make, that the community wants, that we want. And so when I look at some of these items, I do say, Phil, are these the items of most significance for us? And I do ask about the classification, because I do think there's a difference in capital and expense. And then you told me that there's another item. So I am really concerned, Phil and Jean, about how we do the budgeting and what this stuff really means. And I think it's good that we're starting early and can take a deeper, closer look at it.
Yep. Thank you, B. I feel the same way on a lot of issues. And I think that we need to modify this list. We need to add to it, subtract from it. And we're probably not going to we're starting the conversation tonight, and we have to finish it in about 2 weeks. So my advice is we sent the committee members a simplified spreadsheet from the Airtable of these 9 items. Take some time as your budget homework to go through them, write some notes, and let me know your thoughts on whether or not we should remove them, or perhaps even elevate them in status. I think P is realistic.
Yeah, sorry, Phil. Again, just to cut in, we don't have to worry about elevating, moving them around, or anything else that's irrelevant. What we do need to worry about is what we're deleting, what we want to keep, and definitely, as you pointed out, just again, we want to beef up the notes section whenever possible with knowledge and input from the committee members who, after all, use these streets and have these things in their faces on a regular basis. Okay. So you got Brian, Andrew, and Sandy up, Phil.
So I just wanted to echo what a lot of people were saying, and B in particular, about aspirational or big ticket budget items, this kind of stuff that may be unlikely to happen. I think that, as the former chair of the budget committee and somebody who's prepared a lot of these budget submissions, we've done a lot of cleaning out of dead wood on these lists so far. And the things we're talking about tonight, they're pretty recent additions, and they're things that haven't been funded, haven't even had an alternate proposal submitted by the agencies or by the city. And I think that if it's something that we really believe that the district would be better if it had, and if it's at all feasibly possible to have the issue solved by budgetary allocations, then it should be on the priorities list. We do not have an excess number of them right now. We don't have to worry about really clearing them out. I was a proponent of the bus terminal suggestion just because I didn't think we were at the point where we were worried about specifically what was going to be installed and whether or not what was going to be proposed was going to have specific negative impacts on anybody. I mean, obviously the district has a lot of buses coming through it and has a lot of negative effects from the buses not having somewhere to park. So it leads to follow that with a number of available sites in the district for development that they should consider designating some of that space for bus layovers or bus parking. And a bus depot is a really easy way to do that. I still think that there's a little bit of resistance to that idea, in the sense, not that we think that the district would be worse off if it had a bus depot, but this idea that, oh, we'll never get that, we'll never get the Second Avenue subway, we'll never get another park in the district. I think we just need to keep asking on this. These things can change very quickly, and we don't exactly know what's going to happen in the next 2 years in city and state politics. I don't think we know what's going to happen in the next 2 months in city and state politics. I think we should ask for what we believe the district would make the district better. I think that that is our job to do that, and not fuss over whether or not we're submitting budget priorities that are likely to get funded. I don't think that that's how we should approach this task.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Andrew, you're up next.
Thanks. So my view, actually, I agree with what was just said. And I think that Larry actually raised an interesting point. Just briefly, in my day job, people around me have looked at the Gateway project, obviously not in our district, right? Connecting New York and New Jersey, and actually the whole country really through rail. And the Biden administration came in after 4 years of Trump denying that project with billions of dollars being promised. I think that we should take an outlook again, similar to what was just said, that what Brian just said, that the next 4 years may actually be a time when we see an infusion of federal transit dollars into New York and cities like it. And I think probably now is the time to ask for as much as possible. Just sort of betting that that the city and state is going to get the money that it needs to do these projects. So I just those are my thoughts.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'd agree with both of those things actually personally, but that's not quite the question. The question is which of these things doesn't fit what it is that we want to do, aspirationally, practically, or otherwise right now. So let's keep focused on that with all those background issues in mind. Sandy, you were up next. So you're on.
And it sounds like we probably want to keep all of these, but we haven't really talked about what we want to add.
Well, there's no point in doing that right now.
Well, when will we do that?
That would be later in the year when the next budget cycle starts. This is strictly about cleaning up this list, looking at it and reevaluating it. That's what it is.
So it sounds like, if I can just summarize, that I think we want to keep what's on the list. Is that not probably the case?
I don't know yet. Larry, you're up next.
Okay, quickly on the 2nd Avenue subway notes. I think this should be updated. I think it's out of date. October of last year, that information no longer is relevant. And in its place, we should consider making a request for planning funding at the very minimum.
Okay, well,
that's what the budget.
Phil, you outlined the procedure that you'd like to follow with this, which is that if you'd repeat it, you want the board members to, I believe, send you these observations.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yes.
In what format?
The office emailed the spreadsheet that you see on the screen. You can add a column and put your comments in there. And then I'll work them into the current explanation column, and we can look at it again perhaps in a week, in a month. And that might be the final time that we do it before it has to go to the budget committee.
To you directly.
My thinking, excuse me?
Send it to you directly?
Yes, please.
You can copy me on it, but send it to Phil because he's actually dealing with this. That's correct.
We may not have as much time as we'd like to hash through the explanations, but if we have a basis, if we have some good documentation as to why we chose what we chose, that will be helpful when we look at this process in 6 months and then again in 12 months. The budget committee needs our decision sooner rather than later. So it's a little last minute. We'll do the best we can.
But we can roll this over until next month to finish it up.
Yes, that is possible. In fact, the budget committee is starting early this year, so they've got that benefit of extra time. Honestly, the budget committee is not really going to wrap all of this up in earnest until starting like September. So quite literally, the transportation committee could bring this list and put it on the agenda for the next 5 months. And because, given the pace at which we're going now, it might take that long. But from my own, sort of outside input, it does seem like there are a lot of thoughts about all these things. And maybe now that this is front and center, everybody will take this list, study it more closely, and then maybe you can come back next month and you can continue the conversation. But it did seem like the one about the traffic study in the Queens Midtown area seemed to, there was some consensus that maybe that one is outdated. And if that's the case, if everyone can agree on that, maybe that's a place to start. So sort of low hanging fruit. Okay, Stanley's shaking your head, so maybe it's not. But that's for the committee to decide. But I think Jean was correct in that identifying if there's anything here that seems, okay, it's really past its prime, let's agree to get rid of it. But if there isn't, well then bring it back next month and we'll see.
Exactly. So why don't we do this? Let's wrap up this part of the discussion tonight because as a longtime board member, I know that my attention span for this stuff is about 3 seconds and I stretch it, but we've now done it for about 25 minutes. And I think that's beyond what anybody's going to be able to think through anyway. I think we've made headway. I think we've laid a lot of groundwork and set up the field. That's really good. And I think, as Jesus suggests, that what we should do is just in the intervening month, I'd ask all of you to go back and look at the document that Phil sent you, make your own notes, send him the information that he's asked for, and then we'll pick it up next month and see if we can make final decisions. If not, we'll keep it shorter and have another bite at the apple, but it'd be good if we can do that. So let's aim for that as an aspirational goal and leave it there for tonight, if that's okay with everybody, unless somebody's got a burning desire to spend more time doing this right now. That's what you call a leading question. Okay, I'm not seeing any takers for my offer, so let's figure that we wrap that up for tonight. And thank you all, because I know it's a lot of fun. I can see from your smiling faces, it's just the scintillating topic you've been waiting for all year. Anyway, moving on to the chair's report. Going to be really brief. First of all, I'd like to thank our land use chair, Adam Hartke, who made the map that you only got to see one piece of. It's actually a very nicely elaborate map with layers and calendars attached and everything else. That's going to be for our city council members as much as it is for us. So no wasted labor there. He also made slides out of them, which unfortunately we didn't use. But if you want to see them, we have them, so we can certainly pass them around. So thank you, Adam. And the other thing I want to mention is to set up what's coming up under old and new business, which you've already received, which is the reso about us hiring Sam Schwartz Engineering to do some very basic design and studies of the 3rd Avenue reso that we passed last month. We had Jesus and I had a meeting with them last week. It was very productive. We've got an agreement. It should help us in a number of ways. We're looking to do a few things with it. One is simply to get DOT to move faster on this than they're likely to without the additional prod of the outside information and design put. They have a lot of respect for Sam Schwartz. We all know that. That'll help too. And then there's the ancillary things, which are that 2 things. One is that we would like CB6 to get more publicity and public recognition for what it does. This is a way, we've already had some press resulting from this. Hopefully that's a way to get some more when we have this thing in process, which will also help pressure DOT into actually doing some deliverables on it. And the other thing is to give other community boards a model to follow in their own districts about how to do this, which is something else we've discussed with the borough president's office. So that's what's behind it. And that's why it's here. And so are there any questions? And you had your hand up even as I started to speak. So I guess you have something to say. So go ahead. Or was that?
I had my hand up because I did my homework and read it in advance.
Oh,
So,
okay, good. Well, there you go.
My question was whether this has any budgetary impacts on our funding for George Janes, like the work that George is doing.
It does not.
Excellent. That's just what I was hoping to hear.
Good. Well, I'm glad we could satisfy you. B, you're up next.
I think looking at it that this is going to come out of our operating budget. I actually think hiring Sam Schwartz to do this type of study will be a model. I think he has looked at various aspects. I think looking at how much we've paid for past studies, I think putting a $20,000 cap on it right now is important. And I would be very supportive of us moving ahead and doing this.
Thank you. Okay, Sandy, you're up next. It's your floor.
Did we consult 3 different consultants to get this pricing? Or did we just go to Sam Schwartz?
Jesus?
We went directly to Sam Schwartz. The requirement to do a full RFP is for, it comes into effect when you go above this.
And I just wonder, we've had reports from like Philip Habib, some other consultants who are equally qualified. I wondered why we wouldn't try and do a more equitable search for consultant.
That is an idea. That's an idea the committee has some appetite for. That's something that can be discussed. One of the things that was a consideration, though, is that the fiscal year ends at the end of June. And so for an RFP to sort of properly go off the ground, you're probably looking at least a month and a half, 2 months. Our understanding is that this kind of work is going to take about 2 to 3 months. You're then running up against the end of the fiscal year. And if you do, then it could spill into the next fiscal year, at which point funding is more uncertain.
Because I think it sets us kind of a bad precedent to reach out to just one consultant.
It actually doesn't, because it's a $20,000 cap. And so it's actually.
I understand that, Jean, but it means we're not we're not asking for multiple consultants. I think the other time that we did this, we did ask for at least 3 consultants for a $20,000 cap. And I would also like to just reiterate that, I didn't think we were absolutely certain of which part of 3rd Avenue we were going to be looking at.
We were absolutely certain. We passed the reso that was absolutely certain about what we were looking at.
I would just say I'm not in favor of doing this without actually engaging a full search for, or allowing other consultants to provide their proposal.
Thank you. Okay, Andrew.
Sorry, I'm like typing at the same time.
I'm sorry, you are taking minutes, yes.
Yeah, I am. Copious notes. Not to debate this, I just want to say, as somebody who deals in government and I have to deal with budgets and caps, I very much hear Sandy's point about the fairness, but I got to say, if this is under cap, this company has done a good job and we know it's going to be quick based on good experience. I'm all in favor of just paying them as long as it's within the, the ethics standards, knowing that they've done a good service before, they're going to get it done quick. I think if it was above the cap, obviously we got to follow the rules. But if you guys went under 20 and the rule is 20, I got no problems with just if they perform well before. That's my view.
Thank you. Anne, you're up next. You have to
So I think Sandy raises a really good point. And while I am a huge admirer of Sam Schwartz, I wonder if he is going to give us the most creative ideas for this. If one of the other consultants that we have a history with might not come up with some more interesting solutions. So, well, I support this and I understand the timing of it. I think Sandy makes a really excellent point on sort of a diversity of ideas.
Phil, you're up.
I'm going to err on the side of Andrew's thinking, which is that if we are, following the rules and under cap, I think Sam Schwartz deals with DOT a lot, has a lot of the data that we need in order to configure Third Avenue for these streets. And if we're playing by the rules, I think that they would do a great job, and they do so in a timely fashion, which is part of the reason that perhaps we went to them right away, which is if we want to reconfigure Third Avenue, like I said, in a timely fashion, choosing one person, doing it within the limits set forth, I think that's the way to go.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions. Let me say that the point that Sandy's raised, that Ann seconded, is well taken. The consideration here is that we're operating within the law and the ethics that are imposed on us by that law with this budgetary amount. And we are looking at a very time-sensitive issue, because the reason we're doing this, after all, is to speed up DOT's realization of what it is that we want to try to do there, so that we can take it to the community and show them, and then go back. That we've already got a long and cumbersome process ahead of us, and to slow it down even more effectively means that we may lose the chance to do it at all. So that's kind of what we're looking at. Those are the trade-offs, and understanding that there's no perfect answer to this. I just suggest that one more time, maybe we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and certainly within legal and ethical bounds. So I'd strongly urge us to go ahead, but everybody's going to vote what they want to vote. B, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to raise the question because I assume, based on the ethics of what we read, that you could do sole source, which this is a sole source, under the $20,000. I assume when it leaves the community board, it's going to be reviewed to make sure it meets the ethical standards and doesn't deviate. And with those assumptions, many of us do sole source based on timing and sensitivity. So I don't have a problem as long as we've met the requirements of the ethics and what the outline is to do sole source.
I'll let Jesus answer that because he's the technical whiz who's sitting on that.
We have met the requirements for this amount of money. And yes, there are reviews that are happening oftentimes because of the amounts. They happen without our participation. And if there is something that seems to be amiss, then they involve us. But so far, we have never had, we've done a couple things like this, but we've never had anything come up with.
Excuse me.
Time for computer difficulty. Yeah, that's okay. I'm sorry, Jesus, were you done?
Yes, but it seems like James Wilson would like the floor.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Sandy had her hand up too. So let's, James, you go first. Sandy, you can wait till James is done, please.
I have a question. The discussions with Sam Schwartz, do they involve a garage on 26th Street? Is this part of the discussion in advance? The area between 26th and 32nd Street, would it be part of this study to report on a garage serving this area?
No, those are on the side streets themselves. They're going to do fundamental traffic studies, but they're not going to be reporting on those garages per se because they're not on 3rd Avenue. I believe you're talking about garages that are on the side streets. I'm trying to clarify.
I'm talking about a building on 26th Street on 1st Avenue.
1st Avenue.
It was proposed quite some time ago. It was proposed as a garage for sanitation trucks.
This has nothing to do with that.
That's why I'm raising this question.
Okay. No, that's why it's not on Third Avenue. That's actually not even on First Avenue. That's over between the FDR and First Avenue, just north of the Astor Levy playground, actually. So
It's actually a building exactly on the corner of 26th Street and First Avenue. That's where it was proposed. In any case, since it's not that, I don't have to worry about it. But I raised the question because I want to make sure that Sam Schwartz doesn't come up with an idea for a garage at that point. That's what I'm concerned about.
he's two avenues over, and it has nothing to do with that building. No.
Excellent.
You can rest assured that that's true.
Thank you, Gene.
Okay. Sandy, yes, you're up again.
And just, I want to make a plug for some of the smaller businesses that are really suffering. I'm sorry, someone's yelling in the background here. And Sam Schwartz is it's a big firm. I just think this is a great opportunity for us to support maybe some of our local traffic people and a small business. That's all I'm going to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. So any other questions, points of discussion? Well, do I see, B, is that your hand up? Yes, it is. Yes.
Joe, it just triggered something. Does this have to go to the board itself for approval?
It does.
Okay, so it will have to be discussed at the board level. Thank you.
Okay, your hand's still up, B.
Yeah, I'd like to move the question.
Oh, okay. Fine.
I just needed the point of information, which is what I wanted to know.
I wasn't sure whether your question was there, your hand was up on purpose or just left over.
It was left over to move the question.
Okay, good deal. So do we have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, great. Thank you, Andrew. All right, so I guess, Brendan, we should take a vote.
When I call your name, please say whether you are in favor, opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause. B. Disman?
In favor.
Charles Fernandez?
In favor.
Andrew Gross?
In favor.
Yusuf Khalid?
Opposed.
Danny McKee?
Opposed.
Phil Napolitano?
In favor.
Matt Roberts?
Abstain.
Gene Santoro?
In favor.
Larry Shire?
In favor.
Ann Seligman?
You have to turn your mic on, Ann.
Sorry, I don't know why the space bar is not working. Abstain.
Brian Van Nieuwenhoven?
In favor.
Ronnie White?
In favor.
And James Wilson?
James, you got to unmute your mic.
Okay, in favor.
Okay, with 9 in favor, 2 opposed, and 2 abstaining, the resolution passes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to breathe for a minute and try to get my brains back together. I'm sure you're all tired too. So unless there are any other questions or other items, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. We've been at this for 2 hours and 12 minutes, or 2 hours and 8 minutes. Andrew, you have your hand up.
Very briefly, it's an old business. It's not, I sent an email to the office like over a month ago. Gene was copied about this plaque, World War I plaque removed from Grand Central. Just asking if the office can check in on that because there was no follow-up. I appreciate it.
Yes, we can check in on that.
Thank you.
Okay, back to a motion to adjourn. You all want to stay?
So moved.
Okay. All righty. We don't need a second for that. So we're done. Thank you all. It was a long meeting.